Okay, Moby, Ms. Lemry is saying, you dragged us off in this impossible direction. You tell us whether the world is a good place or a bad place. It's the first day of second semester. 13 of us have signed up for Lemry's Baby, an elective class called Contemporary American Thought. To be enrolled, you must be a second semester senior willing to examine your beliefs through a magnifying glass. It's a Lemry class, so you'd best be serious. Considering the alternative, I say, in answer to her query, it's a good place. That gets a titter. All you're saying, she says back, is that the known is better than the unknown. There's a strong case to be made for that belief being a core factor in keeping humans on their knees. She looks around the room, seeing mild interest. I call this class Contemporary American Thought. That's so it will look good on your transcript. Its subtitle is Accountability, because you will be held accountable for everything you say. If Mr. Calhoun tells me the world is a good place to live, given the alternative, he needs to define good, and he needs to convince us he knows the alternative. In other words, he is required to be careful when he opens his mouth. We need to put value back into words and ideas. She scans the room again. Interest is picking up. I believe the prospect of talking about what is in this class is exciting to most of us, particularly when we're going to do it with one of the most exquisite human beings alive, for my money. Lemry is something else to look at, for one thing. She's petite and about as sexy as you can get without being a movie star, or a belly dancer, with shoulder-length blonde hair, dark brown eyes that look right through you, and big dangly earrings that push her face out at you. If you have impure thoughts about her, however, you'd better keep them to yourself because she'll flat cut you up if you get disrespectful. Lemry is the women's rights poster girl. Poster person. So let's take a trial run, she says. The subject's a little broad, but go with it. Moby, is the world a good place or a bad place? I picture Sarah Burns up in Sacred Heart, as physically ugly as a person gets, staring into an empty pit. No one home. It's a bad place, I say. Why? Because you can't win, I say. Not for long. Back yourself up, Moby. I look around the room into expectant eyes. They want me to go first, see if I'm going to get eaten up, send the pig to slaughter. It's a little scary because, though I have good friends here, I also have mortal enemies, and you don't want your enemies to know what you think or feel. I went to see Sarah Burns last night, I say. And? It was bad. Make your point, Lemry says gently. You're telling us why the world is a bad place to live. Well, I was thinking, Sarah Burns is up there just staring into space. She doesn't talk or respond to anything. When I looked at her close, when I saw her without her razor-sharp words and her fire, all the stuff she cuts us up with, she looked gone. And I thought, I don't blame you. I'd go away too, because the world doesn't provide any place safe for her. Every day when she gets up, she knows she has to bring her scarred up face to school, knowing what everyone thinks and won't say. There's no place to hide, and it never lets up. I'd call that a bad place to live. I look over to my good friend Ellerby for support, but he stares at his desk. Lemry is quiet a second. I'm not real comfortable talking about someone who isn't here, she says finally, but I think this is worth pursuing. What does anyone else think? Kathy Gould sits forward. That only makes the world a bad place for Sarah Burns. Yeah, I start, but there are thousands of other people. That still only makes it a bad place for them, not all of us. The question is whether it's a good or bad place, period. If it's bad for everybody, or at least the majority. Kathy is a tall redhead, smarter than hell, with the sense of humor of a Brussels sprout. It's hard for me to imagine her taking the side of the world in this one. Depression has been her job, her way of life, since grade school. I feel instant anger that I don't completely understand, and I want to hurt her some way, but Lemry reads my mind. Tell you what, she says. This is a good subject to get started with, broad as it is, but I'm really not comfortable letting it go too far without the person we're talking about being here and giving us permission. So what I need are examples a little farther from home for the time being, okay? I pull back while the rest of the class drags out examples from real life. Newspapers, fiction, or wherever. Pitting human joy against human pain. I realized I didn't want to talk about philosophy. I wanted to talk about Sarah Burns. She's my best friend, and she's dying. We became friends when I was as fat as she is ugly, and I promised a long time ago that I would never turn away from her. Told us both that my feelings for her weren't selfish, that I didn't like her only because we shared terminal uglies, as she put it. Actually, Dale Thornton provided the reason for crispy pork rinds. By 8th grade, Dale should have been in his second year of the Army, as many times as he'd been held back. The guy had a driver's license, for Christ's sake. Teachers didn't know what to do with him because every year he was just that much bigger than other kids in the class and not one bit smarter. Every spring they tried to pass him on into high school, and every spring his dad lumbered into the front office to say, by dang, Dale was going to stay right there in 8th grade until he got it right, and the only way he'd finally learn was to do it over and over and over. Then Mr. Thornton would say he'd hate to sue the school, but if they passed Dale on without his necessary life skills, well, then he'd sure have to look into that. I don't know what kind of necessary life skills our school taught that Dale could have used in his life. The teachers all had license plates on their cars, and the parking lot was already paved. And I'll tell you what, I'd seen Dale try to do his homework, and if old man Thornton thought he did anything over and over and over, he had another think coming, which, by the looks of him, he probably wouldn't use. Dale was so big that year he couldn't even get a good fight. We just rolled over like poodles in the path of a Doberman when we saw him coming. I'm telling you, Dale Thornton was pulling down a darn decent living from second-degree lunch money extortion alone, not to mention his protection racket. But then he ran into Sarah Burns. When you live with a dad who has been rejected by the producers of the Halloween movies because he's too mean for the role, and your face has been burned beyond recognition for most of your memory, and you've been reminded every stinking day of your life with funny looks and nasty names, you don't get too excited when some 2-bit would-be dropout sticks his fist in your face and wants your stuff. Sarah Burns has always used pretty rough language, so I won't say exactly what she said the first time Dale confronted her, but I will say she said it twice, once about Dale and once about his mother. Now, probably half the people in our town knew Dale's mother ran off with his uncle, leaving Dale with his dad, who isn't exactly Bill Cosby. And Dale himself had said things about her that were 5 times worse than what Sarah Burns said, but he took immense offense, and he punched Sarah Burns square in the nose, or what's left of it, because Sarah Burns' nose is mostly scar tissue. Sarah Burns' blonde pigtails stood straight out on contact, and she hit the ground so hard the air rushed out of her lungs like a blown popcorn bag. But she sprang back like a plastic Rocky Balboa punching bag, swinging to kill. "Just give me your money, Scarface," Dale said, "and I'll leave you alone." She stuck her chin right in his face and said, "Take it," and he punched her again. I don't think Sarah Burns got in one good lick. Dale was twice her size if he was a pound, and born to fight. But Sarah Burns kept getting up, and pretty soon the bruising and swelling beneath the scars got to looking so bad it even scared Dale. So he said it one more time. "Just give me your money. Give me the money and I'll quit." "When I'm dead, you'll get my money," she said, her teeth clenched so tight I thought I heard them begin to crumble. Then she turned to me. "Eric Calhoun, if he kills me, you better make sure he doesn't get nothing of mine." And I said, "Okay, but if he really killed her, I was pretty sure I'd be hard to find." Dale glared at her again and dropped his fists. "You ain't worth it," he said. "You probably ain't got no money anyway. I'll just take it from your fat friend." Well, my hands were into my pockets about up to the elbows when I heard Sarah Burns' voice. "You give him anything, I'll kill you," she said, and all of a sudden my choices were to get killed by Dale Thornton or get killed by Sarah Burns. Hanging or a lethal injection. I figured just in case I only got crippled for life, I'd still need a friend to carry my stuff around. So I took my hands out of my pockets, real slow-like, and stood there, shaking like a jellyfish riding a jackhammer and sweating like I was going to melt. Old Dale must have been plain worn out and frustrated from hammering on Sarah Burns so long with so little result, because instead of beating me into whimpering slime, he said, "Forget it," and walked away, though not before I lost at least 12 pounds in nervous runoff. My knees felt so weak, I dropped to my butt like a shot put right there on the ground and closed my eyes. But a shadow passed in front of them, and they popped right back open. 2 scarred hands grabbed my collar and yanked me to my feet. I stood sucking air inches from Sarah Burns' pummeled face. "You fat little dork," she said. "You were going to give that juvenile delinquent money." "He was going to kill me." She pulled me closer and sneered. "Every time you let somebody take your stuff or let them see you hurt, you get killed." I already knew that, but the threat of her decking me had not completely passed. I changed the subject. "Hey, I thought we weren't going to call each other names. You called me a fat dork." "You're right," she said, releasing my collar. "Remind me of that tomorrow, and if I'm not still so mad I want to skin you alive, I'll say I'm sorry." Well, Sarah Burns never did say she was sorry, and I really didn't think she would. But it was the next day, when she really wasn't mad at me anymore, that we began plans for crispy pork rinds. And on Friday of that week, right before first period, a copy appeared on the desk of every kid in 8th grade. The headline read, "16 years ago in history, man with brain the size of tic-tac mates with amoeba. Couple gives birth to giant adjusto. Names him Dale." It didn't equal the level of National Enquirer journalism we planned to reach with a little practice, but it was a pretty good start. The bell rings, jarring my mind back into cat class, where my body has been filling out space. I drop my books into my backpack, and I pass Lemry's desk. She stops me. "You zoned on me," she says. "Where'd you go?" I say, "Away from Kathy Gould." "Couldn't take the heat?" "Not today." "You got a minute?" "Just about. You want to talk about Sarah Burns?" "I don't know." "Yeah." She just sits. It scares me. "Coach, seeing her with everything stripped away, she looked like a beat-up old container or something. She looked dead." "Did you talk to anyone?" "A counselor. She said to keep coming up and act normal and talk about things we'd talk about if Sarah Burns were answering me." Lemry puts an arm on my shoulder. "That must have been hard." I smile. And not just because I look like some kind of unconscious cretin holding on a half-hour conversation with someone who doesn't give out answer number 1 either. Sarah Burns is really important to me, and I need to be important to her too. But I'm not right now. Nothing is. God, before there was swimming or you or Ellerby or anything, there was me and Sarah Burns. Lemry starts gathering her books. "You need to remember what's going on with her right now isn't about you. You were right, Moby. We forget she has to get up every day and face herself. This could be her way of taking a vacation." "What if she never comes back?" Lemry raises her eyebrows and grimaces. "I don't know. I'm not a shrink." Two, a couple of things that stand out. We're introduced to several new characters. Number 1, we're introduced to Ms. Lemry, and we get a sense of who she is and what she's like. She seems to be very much a supporting character and someone who is on Moby's, Eric's side. So that's a really kind of neat thing to see. She's also Eric's swim coach. So she's got a couple roles there. We're introduced to Dale Thornton. And Dale Thornton is a pretty interesting character. In case you didn't catch it, he is a 16-year-old in 8th grade. Now, for most 8th graders, they are 13, and so that means he would have been taking 8th grade 4 times in a row. Okay? And the joke, in case you missed it, well, his life skills, making license plates or paving the parking lot, those are the tasks of a person who's in jail. So he thinks that Dale's on his way to going to jail, and he's just kind of being sarcastic about it. We also learn something about Sarah Burns in this flashback. We learn that she is a tough character and that she doesn't give in. She doesn't give in to pain. She doesn't give in to people. She doesn't give in to anything. She just refuses to show weakness. And you have to think that that is in response to her scarring and the sort of physical disfigurement that she's had. But she's very smart, and she seems to have a real sort of connection to Eric. When we get to the funny part, to me anyway, we see that they wrote crispy pork rinds because they were trying to get back at Dale Thornton. And so Sarah Burns, who took the beating of her life, okay, and Eric, who was nervous and scared because he thought he was going to get beaten up, they wrote crispy pork rinds, boom, to try to have some fun and get back at Dale Thornton for beating her up. It's kind of interesting. Now, it's also interesting that them doing this makes Mr. Motts from Chapter 1 so angry as well. So it's something that you want to think about, sort of what is the connection then between these different characters. We see that Mr. Motts is an antagonist. We see that Dale Thornton is an antagonist. And then we see these other characters being introduced, like Mrs. Lemry. So pay attention to it. I think this is a pretty exciting book. Moving forward, a couple things you want to keep in mind. What happens next? I mean, they wrote this. How did Dale take it? Does he even understand it? I mean, he's in 8th grade for 4 years. Does that mean he's just too dumb to get that they're making fun of him? We'll find out. All right, guys.